The Fantasy Football Blitz, brought to you by Come and Go. Pretty self-explanatory.
It's a new season, and the hope of all 12 teams in the league has been renewed. After a prolonged and uneventful draft, the time has finally come to embark upon a new campaign, rife with upsets, comebacks, bad decisions, and more bets from the notorious Danny Bale himself. If you tuned in last season, pre-ESPN would like to apologize for falling off the face of the earth. We simply didn't have the bandwidth or desire to produce the show each week. Deal with it. In case you were wondering, the pesky Blue Barracudas found a way to claw to a 117-115 victory over a plucky wide receiver U team that won a magical late-season run. That victory allowed the league's most consistent villain to capture his third title in 5 seasons. What will happen this season? Will newcomer Dan Callahan live up to the lofty expectations set by his brother? Will Jonathan Taylor and company, or imposter wide receiver U, live up to their potential and end the Barracudas' run of dominance? Will the Faulkners and Meeks begin to trend back in the right direction? Will injured Reserve and Dirty Danes Drew find their way into contention and build off a strong draft the past 2 seasons? And what the hell will happen to my favorite team name, Dirty Mike and the Boys? To week 1, we go. Winners of the last 5 championships and a rematch of the final from a year ago, wide receiver U would look to get a semblance of revenge on the road against the Blue Barracudas. Josh Allen, Antonio Gibson, and Gabe Davis helped keep wide receiver U afloat as the rest of the roster had a lackluster performance. Luckily enough for the U, the Barracudas were uncharacteristically low and could only cobble together a measly 90 points. Wide receiver U with a good start, the defending champs looking to bounce back. In a matchup of a legendary franchise that has the look of a contender versus a completely new franchise that has the look of a team that could go either way, Jonathan Taylor and company hits the road against the newest addition to the league, Kittle Me Zeke. Although Kittle Me Zeke put together a 105-plus point performance, including a 30-burger from off-season acquisition Pat Mahomes, it wouldn't be enough against the well-rounded top-to-bottom effort put forth by, you guessed it, Jonathan Taylor and company. Jesse with a hot start at 1-0. Daniel falls in his first try in the league. Last season, Dirty Danes Drew had the look of a team that could go all the way. But it wasn't meant to be, as they floundered to finish the season. What will they do this time around against the legendary multiple championship-winning Cole Stender and Thug Basham? Nothing went right for the Thugs, getting less than 10 points from 8 of his players and leaving an 18-point effort on the bench. It simply wasn't their week. By contrast, the Danes threw up a huge 140-point effort in a one-sided rout that sent Drew to 1-0 and has Cole stumbling out of the gates. In a battle of complete unknowns, last year's last-place finishers Dirty Mike and the Boys looked to get off to a better start against Jared's Schusterville Scalps Moo, which of course makes a ton of sense. It was by far the week's closest matchup, and both teams saw sporadic scoring from up and down their lineup, but ultimately, Russ couldn't cook quite enough, as Nathaniel Hackett blew it for seemingly everyone, including Jared. He falls just short and drops 0-1. PJ picks up the dub, 96-94. The league's most polarizing and combative owner, Danny Bale, takes his group of imposters on the road against the Jekyll and Hyde Mega League. 3 points from Aaron Rodgers is about the worst thing that could have happened to the Meeks, as they failed to get much production from anyone in the lineup. Conversely, the other worst thing that could have happened was imposter wide receiver U getting an explosion from the receivers. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Stephon Diggs combined for 80 points en route to a 60-point drubbing of the Meeks. They start 0-1. Danny starts 1-0. And the week's highest scoring affair. The rising injured reserve seemed to finally have a squad worthy of mentioning. Takes on another team that looks to make a bit of noise itself, as Peyton's big trust in the Cooks headed to face Michaelie. While ordinarily 121 points would be enough to win, the Cooks didn't quite have enough Crisco in this one, as they lose a barn burner to injured reserve that got scoring plenty from top to bottom. They put up a league-high 153 points and start the season with a bang. Big Trust will look to regroup as it hosts an 0-1 Barracudas next week. A quick look ahead. To next week, we have some great matchups on the slate. Schusterville Scalps Moo goes on the road against wide receiver U. Possible contenders Dirty Danes Drew squares off with Jonathan Taylor and co., which could be a high-scoring affair. Kittle Music will look to get its first win on the road against Dirty Mike and the boys. Imposter wide receiver U will host Thug Passion. Mika Leak will be away at the 1-0 injured reserve. And the Barracudas will look to right the ship against the 0-1 Big Truss and the Cooks. We'll see you next time on the Fantasy Football Blitz.